On June 12th, SpaceX starts trading on the NASDAQ. By some measures, it is the biggest company to ever go public in history. And within the first few minutes of trading, the price is going to jump. The moment it does, millions of people are going to pull out their phones and decide they need to get in before it is too late. Here is the problem with that instinct. And it is a big one. Most people think an IPO is a single event where everyone buys at the same price. It is not. It is a machine built in a very specific order, and the people who designed it sit at the front of the line. By the time you can click buy, several groups have already locked in their position ahead of you. Here is where it gets interesting. SpaceX is going public at $135 a share. That is the IPO price. It goes almost entirely to large institutions and insiders, negotiated weeks before the stock ever trades. The price you will actually pay when you open your brokerage app on June 12th is whatever the open market sets that morning. For a deal this famous, that price will almost certainly be higher. Maybe much higher. So you are not buying at the starting line. You are buying after the race has already begun. So before we talk about whether it is worth it, let us look at what is actually underneath. In 2025, SpaceX brought in about $18.7 billion in revenue. That sounds like a serious business, but in that same year, the company lost roughly $5 billion. Here is what nobody tells you. Most of us think of SpaceX as a rocket company. The rockets are not the main story anymore. The single profitable piece of this business is Starlink, the satellite internet service, which generated around $4.4 billion in operating income. The rockets themselves are growing slowly. The new AI division is burning cash rather than making it. So when you buy a share of SpaceX, you are really buying one profitable engine, pulling several expensive cars that are still losing money. Here is something that makes me genuinely angry every time I think about it. The price being charged for all of this is $1.75 trillion. That means you are paying roughly $94 for every single dollar of revenue this company brings in. Most large profitable companies trade in the low single digits on that measure. Even the market's most beloved high-growth tech giants rarely hold anything close to 94. One of the most respected independent research firms on Wall Street ran a detailed valuation and concluded SpaceX is worth around $780 billion. That is roughly half the IPO price. And here is what makes that number even more striking. $780 billion is almost exactly where SpaceX was privately valued just a few months earlier. The entire jump to $1.75 trillion happened in the window right before the public was allowed in. Most people never notice this part. There is a lockup. The employees and early investors who own cheap shares cannot sell them on day one. They have to wait. But when that window opens, usually in the months just after the first quarterly earnings report as a public company, a wave of insider shares hits the market. Then another wave. Then another. Each one arrives when the opening excitement has faded and there are fewer eager buyers left to absorb the selling. Fresh supply meets falling demand, and the people absorbing that supply are ordinary investors who bought in on the hype. That is not a rounding error. That is the relay. And you are the last runner holding the baton. I want you to hear this number clearly. For you to simply match what a plain index fund returns over 10 years, SpaceX would have to grow its revenue 41% every single year for a decade straight. Not to beat the index fund, just to tie it. Almost no company at this scale in history has ever done that. So here is the third path. It costs you nothing but patience. Let the first 90 days play out. Let the forced buying from index funds run its course. Let the first wave of insiders selling wash through. After that, the price will reflect the actual business instead of the excitement. The best companies stay investable for years. You do not need to own SpaceX on day one to do well with it. The countdown they are selling you is not real. Great company, extraordinary rockets, but a price that has already written the miracle into the script.